Imagine you're walking through a packed street market in China. On the tables is an entire world of brands, sneakers with very familiar logos, luxury handbags, shiny watches, sleek phones. Everything looks so convincing you have to squint to tell it isn't real. But the prices are unbelievably low. You know they're not genuine, the seller knows, and honestly, the whole world knows. The important question is not are there fakes or not, but why has China become the paradise of counterfeits for the entire planet? It's a fascinating paradox. Today's China is no longer just the stereotype of shabby workshops that only copy. It's a country with some of the fastest high-speed trains in the world, home to tech giants on global rankings, and cities like Shanzhai that went from fishing village to hardware Silicon Valley in just a few decades. Yet at the same time, many international reports say China and Hong Kong are still the source of a large share of fake goods seized around the globe in recent years. Why is a rising power that wants to compete through innovation so tightly associated with fake shoes, fake bags, and fake phones? To understand that, we have to rewind to the 1980s and 1990s, when China began opening up and became the factory of the world. Corporations from the US, Europe, and Japan poured into coastal provinces like Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Jiangsu, building plants and placing manufacturing orders. They brought designs, brands, and technology. China provided land, cheap labor, ports, and a government eager to offer every possible incentive for production. When China joined the WTO in 2001, this wave grew even bigger. Alongside the flow of legitimate goods, a shadow wave formed. Production lines, workers, and suppliers began learning how to copy, run night shifts, reuse designs, molds, and components to churn out knockoffs. If you visit the city of Yiwu in Zhejiang province, you get the feeling you're walking inside a gigantic global supermarket. There are tens of thousands of stalls and millions of different products, Christmas decorations, toys, electronics accessories, clothes, suitcases, household items. Many observers call it the world's wholesale market, a place where shop owners from Africa, the Middle East, South America, and Eastern Europe come to fill containers with goods. Among the endless piles of cheap items on display, quite a few are copies of famous brands, with slightly altered logos or tweaked colors. In a way, Yiwu is a miniature version of the fake goods paradise, a key link in the global supply chain for counterfeits. International organizations like the OECD and others have repeatedly pointed out that China and Hong Kong are the main origins of counterfeit goods in global trade, making up a large share of the shipments seized by customs worldwide. But to understand why, we can't just blame people's awareness or a culture of disrespecting IP. We have to look at the structure of the entire production machine, the legal system, the culture of copying, and even the demand coming from consumers all over the world. First of all, China became a paradise for fakes because it's a paradise for manufacturing. Once you've built a massive network of factories that can produce everything from screws, leather pieces, fabric, and chips to full assembly lines, copying a successful product becomes very easy. Factories that officially manufacture for global brands know the process, specifications, and quality standards inside out. Around them are countless smaller workshops making accessories, packaging, and spare parts. In a brutally competitive environment with razor-thin margins, any shoe or bag that sells well worldwide immediately becomes a target for imitation. From there, a kind of shadow life cycle of products develops. By day, the production line runs official orders for a major brand. At night, part of that capacity is quietly used for no-name orders or products bearing tweaked logos. Designs don't need R&D, marketing doesn't need a budget. All they have to do is copy what's already proven to sell. This late but extremely fast follower model is especially common among smaller factories. They can't compete on original innovation, but they're very flexible in responding to small and urgent orders from around the world. Another factor is the satellite structure around production hubs. In places like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Yiwu, thousands of small workshops orbit a few core industries such as fashion, footwear, and electronics. When a designer bag becomes an online symbol on social media, within weeks or even days these workshops can pump out inspired versions that are basically fakes. They don't need contracts with big brands. They sell directly to overseas traders through wholesale markets and e-commerce platforms. Global logistics infrastructure completes this counterfeit paradise. Fake goods from China can reach almost anywhere in the world in small, cheap parcels sent through postal services, couriers, or mixed containers. A significant share of seized counterfeits travel via post and express delivery small shipments that easily blend into legitimate trade flows. The internet and online marketplaces shrink the distance between a back alley factory in Guangdong and a customer in Paris or New York to just a few clicks. But focusing only on the hardware of production is not enough. China also has a very particular cultural story about copying. In East Asian traditions, learning by copying the classics, model calligraphy, and a master's work was a legitimate way to train. Under the old imperial exam system, students had to memorize and reproduce classical texts. In many crafts, skills were passed down by making identical copies of the master's pieces and only later adding variations. The idea of copy first to learn, then create runs deep in culture not just in China, but across many Asian societies. When modern industrialization and markets arrived, that mindset met the mass production era. A curious concept emerged, Shanzhai, a word that originally meant mountain stronghold, bandit fortress, but in recent decades has been used to describe fake goods, imitations, and an entire copycat culture in China. At first, Shanzhai referred mainly to fake mobile phones, mimicking famous models from Nokia, Motorola, iPhone, and others, but at prices low enough for farmers and factory workers. Shanzhai manufacturers didn't just copy, they added quirky features the originals didn't have: 2 or 3 SIM slots, TV antennas, huge speakers, or mashup designs borrowing from multiple brands. To many low-income consumers, Shanzhai was not pure villainy. It gave them access to things that were previously reserved for the upper classes. A fake but usable phone, a bag that looks like luxury and is good enough for social media photos, or sneakers that look like what the star players were but cost 1/10 of the price. In the West, counterfeits are usually tied to deception and fraud. But in a slice of Chinese culture, Shanzhai was once seen as a kind of grassroots creativity, breaking the monopoly of big brands, though the line between creativity and IP violation is incredibly thin. Of course, once the scale grows beyond small workshops and village markets, things stop looking harmless. Counterfeits today are not just t-shirts and handbags. They include car parts, cosmetics, toys, medicines, and even aircraft components. International reports warn that dangerous counterfeits in global trade are worth tens of billions of dollars each year, with China and Hong Kong still among the main sources. At that point, the issue is no longer just who loses licensing revenue, but also user safety, environmental impact, and fair competition in the market. You might ask, so where is the Chinese state in all this? In reality, China is not a lawless Wild West. It has IP laws, national strategies on IP protection, crackdowns on fake goods, and specialized IP courts established since 2014 in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and later in more cities. Recent studies suggest these courts have significantly improved the handling of IP disputes and increased the number of successful lawsuits, benefiting both Chinese and foreign companies. But in practice, there's a huge gap between law on paper and life in the marketplace. In many localities, fake goods workshops provide jobs, tax revenue, and income for the whole area. Local governments sometimes turn a blind eye or only impose light penalties during inspection campaigns, while profits from fakes are enough to offset that risk. On top of this, many counterfeits aren't sold domestically but exported, which weakens the political incentive to crack down hard. The damage is happening somewhere else, not here. There's another structural reality. In a vast, fast-changing economy like China's, the central government can issue slogans and launch campaigns, but enforcement lies in the hands of thousands of local authorities, each with its own priorities. When GDP growth, jobs, and social stability are still top goals, IP protection often becomes the second or third priority. The result: China has both very tough IP rulings in high-profile cases, and at the same time markets that openly sell fake goods right under everyone's nose. From the consumer side, this paradise of fakes also mirrors deep social contradictions. China is one of the countries where the number of billionaires has risen fastest, but it's also home to hundreds of millions of people who only recently escaped poverty or still earn low wages. Western luxury brands have become symbols of status and success in the eyes of many urban young people, yet their prices, compared to actual incomes, are extremely out of reach. In that context, counterfeits become a kind of psychological shortcut. They satisfy the feeling of ownership without paying the full price. For others, fakes are simply rational. If something looks the part and kind of works for much less, why pay more? And we shouldn't forget the role of the rest of the world. Without buyers in Europe, America, Africa, and Latin America, this fake goods paradise couldn't exist. On cross-border e-commerce platforms, buyers can clearly see that a $20 item and a $200 item are not going to be the same quality, but they still buy the cheap one out of curiosity, to save money or to try their luck. Studies estimate that fakes account for a few percent of total global trade, hundreds of billions of dollars, mostly originating from a small group of economies, with China the largest among them. In that sense, China's paradise of counterfeits is partly a response to global demand for ultra-cheap goods. Despite the risks, digital technology has made everything even faster. A pair of shoes or a dress goes viral on TikTok or Instagram, worn by a celebrity. Big fashion houses might need months to turn that into a new collection. But in the workshops of Guangzhou, super fast copy teams can take screenshots, zoom in, draft patterns, and release imitation versions in a matter of weeks, sometimes days. Algorithms on e-commerce platforms favor products that sell well, have lots of reviews, and low prices. That creates a powerful incentive for anyone willing to ride the trend without spending money on original design. All of this creates a picture that is both beneficial and full of risk. On the positive side, cheap goods, even if fake, help millions of people get access to products they couldn't afford before. Many small businesses in developing countries import goods from China, then survive on the price difference. But the downside is that creative firms, whether Western or Chinese, lose revenue and long-term incentive to invest in R&D. Counterfeit medicines, cosmetics, children's toys, and vehicle parts can directly endanger users' health and lives. Interestingly, over time, Chinese companies themselves have become victims of the fake goods paradise they helped create. Brands like Huawei, Lenovo, and many domestic labels have built real technology, design, and global market share. They too are copied by smaller competitors at home, fake products copying their designs, logos, and packaging. This creates internal pressure. If China wants to protect its own companies and innovation, it has to tighten the screws on counterfeits, not just treat them as a foreign brand problem. Over the last decade or so, China has tried to move from low-end made in China to created in China, emphasizing innovation and high technology. Reforms around IP courts, higher penalties, and crackdowns on famous fake goods markets like those in Yiwu and Guangzhou are part of this effort. Research shows that specialized IP courts have helped boost patenting and IP litigation, especially in major cities. At the same time, some counterfeit production has started shifting to other lower-cost countries as China itself becomes more expensive. So at this point, we can ask, Is China still an absolute paradise of fakes, exactly like the image in many people's minds? The answer is more complicated than a simple yes or no. It's true that the scale and sophistication of counterfeits in China remain huge, especially in sectors like fashion, accessories, and consumer goods. But at the same time, China is becoming one of the world's biggest sources of patents, new technologies, and strong brands. In the same city, you can find a cutting-edge science park developing 5G, electric cars, and AI at just a few miles away, a market crammed with fake shoes, bags, and watches. Looking back at history, this isn't completely unique. During their industrial booms, Japan and South Korea were accused by the West of being copy specialists before they became technological powerhouses with their own global brands. China is going through that process at a much larger scale and higher speed, so its IP conflicts with the West are sharper and more visible. The paradise of counterfeits may be one phase in industrialization, but how long that phase lasts and how much damage and risk it causes depends on Chinese policy choices and on the attitudes of consumers worldwide. In the end, when you hold a too-good-to-be-true bargain in your hand, the real question isn't just will this item last. It's also who's paying the true price for it. A fashion house that spent years on design? A legitimate factory that complies with safety rules but faces unfair competition? A child playing with a toy made from toxic plastic? Or an entire system that rewards copying instead of creativity? China became a paradise of counterfeits because it brings together massive industrial capacity, a culture of copying, legal and enforcement gaps, and global demand for cheap goods. The next question for each of us is, in that paradise, which side do we want to stand on, the side that pushes for creativity or the side that looks away as the fakes become ever more sophisticated?